Hello, Beverly Hills. I am Max Schwartz, and this is Let's Talk Politics. Today in studio, I have the man that brings you this, Beverly Hills political analyst, CEO and publisher of the Beverly Hills Weekly, Mr. Josh Gross. How are you, Mr. Gross?
Thank you for having me, Max. I appreciate it. It's great to be back here at KBEV.
Glad you're here. Before we start, I would like to apologize to new city manager. His name is Jeff Colin, not Mr. Jeff Cole. Now, with that said, we may start. What is your opinion of the new Board of Education? Do you believe that they have made a positive beginning?
Well, that's a great question, Max. Yeah, I'm very optimistic about the new Board of Education. We just had an election here a month or two ago, and the community clearly indicated they want to change in direction from the previous board. Mm-hmm. So, as it turned out, Beverly Hills Weekly does make political endorsements, and we endorsed both winning candidates, and that was very fulfilling that the community agreed with our point of view. But yeah, I think we're going to see some very interesting changes, and it's going to be very interesting to see.
How does that happen? How does the Weekly choose the candidates they'd like to endorse?
Well, we have an editorial board that meets, and we discuss the issues, and it basically consists of me and our reporter. And of course, I've been doing this for 10 years now. And so we're pretty familiar with the political issues because we cover it on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. And we make a decision towards the end of the election. Who we're going to support. Historically, we've always made our endorsements in the last week of the election, but now we're starting to reconsider that because more and more voters are voting by absentee ballot, and so therefore they're voting earlier than they used to, let's say 10 years ago. And so in the future we might make endorsements earlier, but currently we make them in the last week of the election. And that was a decision we made, and we supported the two winning candidates.
Yes, and I guess you guys have good skills at supporting candidates then.
We try.
What is your opinion of Mr. Fenton's presidential speech? Is there anything that sticks out at you, and if so, for what reason?
Well, Stephen Fenton and I actually went to Beverly together. He's class of 88, I'm class of 91, so he was basically a senior when I was a freshman. And we didn't know each other too well in high school, although his high school girlfriend was my neighbor on South Palm and went to BV with me. So how's that for a small world story? Steve and I became friends in recent years when he started to become politically active. As you know, his parents are very involved in the community. Mm-hmm. And when he ran for school board 2 years ago in 2007, or I guess that's almost 3 years now, I would say a lot of the issues he ran on are issues that I would run on if I was running for school board. I think he has a really good sense of what the community wants from the schools. I think he knows what the schools were at one time and could be again. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to talk about his speech, for example, one of the things he said, which I think was great, was he said that we need teachers and administrators who bleed Beverly. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that mean? That means people who are loyal to Beverly, who spend their entire teaching careers here or administration careers here. And clearly in recent years, we haven't had that. Yeah. And that's something I think the community really wants. When I was growing up here, you'd have situations where administrators would stay here their whole career. They'd start off as a coach or a teacher, teach for maybe 10 or 15 years, and then be an administrator for 10 or 15, 20 years. And then end their career here. So I think that's something the community wants to see, and I think that's definitely something we didn't see from the previous school board, who made it a policy and practice to hire people from outside the district. And what we saw was when they got here, a lot of times they didn't have a good sense of the community or what the community wanted. So that was a second thing that Stephen said, which I think was great in his speech, and I'm sure a lot of your classmates can relate to this. He said that they're going to be much more aggressive about enforcing the dress code. And he said that if you dress like a punk, you're going to be treated like a punk.
Yes.
Well, that got the largest applause of anything he said in his speech.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? That's because we see a lot of the kids when they leave the high school and they go over to Chipotle on South Beverly Drive and their pants are hanging down and they're dressed like gangbangers. No! No way! We're going to really enforce the dress code and make sure that the students act professionally when they're at school.
Because that affects the learning environment.
Absolutely,
that will make it better.
Absolutely does. And let me tell you something else. It shows the pride in your school.
Yeah.
If you're proud to be here, you're going to dress, sharp. You're not going to look like you just left the 4-0 Crips or something like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's something that's going to be interesting to see enforced, and we'll see what happens with that.
Yes, and I completely agree. And yes, that's very important because I know that's been a big question recently, and I know that now there will finally be action taken. Like I believe parents have been practically begging for that for a very long time now. And quickly, while we're talking about board candidate speeches, the next board meeting is January 12th, and you should all look out for that. There's a very important board meeting, and we should see what happens then. And as I know, that will be well covered in the weekly.
Oh, absolutely, we'll be there.
So when do you believe the district should begin to look for a new superintendent? What would be your suggestion as to how they should go about seeking a highly qualified candidate?
Well, superintendent's tough because it's basically the CEO for the whole district.
Yeah.
And I know the board will be emerging on a search in the next couple months. My personal criteria for superintendent is I want someone who understands Beverly Hills. And again, what we've seen with some of the most recent selections, not counting Dr. Gross, who's great, but what we've seen with some of the other principals and administrators is they just don't understand the community. And the advantage of getting someone who's taught here, who's come up the ranks in Beverly Hills, or someone who certainly has exposure with the community similar to Beverly Hills, is they're going to understand the place. And they all have similar qualifications and resumes. That's not an issue. What's at issue is someone who understands what we want and can make the changes that need to happen here. So I think it'll happen over the next couple months. I think it's going to be interesting to see, and I think they certainly have their work cut out for themselves, because the fact of the matter is, when you have a highly contentious school board, as we've had in recent years, that's going to turn off a lot of applicants from coming here, but that's our community, and that's the break. So whoever comes here is going to have to accept that we're a very passionate community when it comes to education. We have
Very tight-knit.
very tight-knit, very strong opinions. A lot of families that have lived here for many years, as you know. Your family's an example of that. And that's the way it's going to be. And so any superintendent applicant needs to understand that.
Yes, and going back to what Dr. Goldberg had said, he said he did not want to rush this process because he wants to choose the right one, go with the right search firm, and not get any superintendents that were rushed in by the search firm because they knew the head or whatever the case may have been. And I know that is very important because we want a superintendent that will stay and make our schools top of the line, setting the standard like our district motto says.
That's right.
And I know that there are quite a few teachers in the district that say, or that have went through the school system. I know that this is very important. This is a very big issue to them because they want to see the schools as the same standard to them as they do to the way they teach in it.
That's right. And let me point one other thing out, Max, which is, there's a perception in the community, the schools aren't as good as they used to be. And let me explain what we mean by that. First of all, in my opinion, Beverly's still a phenomenal school. I don't think you could go to a better high school than Beverly. But what I think the sentiment of the community on a lot of things is that we don't act like it is. We don't market it like it's the greatest school in the world. We don't have the kind of resident participation that we once had. And again, in my opinion, that's directly tied to this issue of having administrators and people that don't know the place. So again, this community is second to none in terms of support of police, fire. Mr. Fenton mentioned that in his speech certainly too. There's no reason why we can't have the same thing with schools, and that's what we're hopefully going to see with our next superintendent.
Yeah, that would be very good because we want teachers and staff that will want to come here every day,
Absolutely.
Not that have to come here every day.
Exactly.
So, as a newspaper publisher, you often have to take positions on controversial issues. One of those is upon us now, opportunity permits. What is your stance on this issue? How do you use the Beverly Hills Weekly to further your stance on your position?
Well, that's a good question, and that's probably the hardest part of my job is, yes, I do have to take positions on political issues, and like you, I'm a political junkie, so I enjoy doing this. But first, on political issues in general, let me say this. I try to take my time and really study the issues because sometimes things are not the way they appear. Sometimes you make a gut reaction decision that isn't necessarily in your best interest. So I try to really study the issues, let them play out before I take a position. You mentioned permits. I personally support phasing out opportunity permits, basically the position that the board has on the table right now.
With the breaking points?
No, I don't support natural breaking points. I support what's on the board, what's on the table now. And the reason for that is that a number of us feel that it just got too out of control. The permit situation was spiraling way out of control. And there's a lot of great kids on permit, a lot of great families that have contributed to the district. But fundamentally, you have to live here or be a faculty staff member. There's a few other qualifications to get a permit. But a lot of us feel the opportunity permit just got totally out of control. And that was one of the big issues in the last election. And the community was clearly making it very clear with the candidates they chose that they want permits brought back down to size. When I was going to Beverly, there was a very small amount of students on permit, maybe max 10%. Now at some grade levels, we have 20-25% on permit. That's very high. And what really concerns us is what about the schools is making residents not want to send their kids here? That's the other issue that still needs to be addressed. And frankly, the previous school board did nothing to address that. And hopefully this new school board will, because we want to see high resident participation in the schools like we had when I was growing up and before that.
And that's what was mentioned in some of the speeches from the last board meeting we had.
Absolutely.
The installation.